If God is for us, then who the is against us?
Conspiracy or not, strategize and plot. Buy back your block, real estate and stocks. Stack what you got, hold down your spot. Strike while you hot and think the man up top. Conspiracy or not, strategize and plot. Buy back your block, real estate and stocks. Stack what you got, hold down your spot. Strike while you hot and think the man up top. Conspiracy or not, strategize and plot. Buy back your block, real estate and stocks. Stack what you got, hold down your spot. Strike while you hot and think the man up top. Conspiracy or not, strategize and plot. Buy back your block, real estate and stocks. Stack what you got, hold down your spot. Strike while you hot and think the man up top.
Conspiracy or not, strategize and plot.
Welcome to the Wealth Mindset with J.D. Garnier. I hope you're having a productive week in your wealth creation journey. And as always, my goal is simple. It's not to help you build wealth. It's not to help you accumulate wealth. It's to help you walk in wealth, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. To take the things that God has already given you and use those to create a life of purpose so that wealth is more than just what you acquire. Wealth is who you become. You with a wealth is not your investments, it's not your real estate, it's not your business, it's you. And before you have any of those things, you have a unique and specific set of talents, abilities, gifts, ideas, habits, disciplines, and inclinations that form the basis of everything that you do in this world. And once you tap into that, you start to build wealth in your life. So I'm going to say it again. You with a wealth. Listen, before we get started, if you like my message, if you like my content, if you like the things that I talk about, please follow me on all social platforms under J.D. Garnier or at Garnier JD. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. Please follow my social media sites, share, like, and support my message. Now listen, this channel is about wealth. I always talk about the wealth mindset. I try my best to give you nuggets and insight and information and wisdom that is going to help you change your economic and your financial circumstances. But when I look at our circumstances collectively, I continue to get disappointed because of the racial wealth gap, right? It's something over the past several years that we've touched on, that we've talked about, and experts believe it's going to take over 250 years to close the racial wealth gap. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, as it stands today, the average white family has a median income of about $180,000. The average black family has a median net worth of less than $18,000. The average white family has a median income of about $85,000. The average black family has a median income of less than $27,000. We have over $1.5 trillion in spending power in our community, and yet we own less businesses and we control less wealth than every other community. And so there's been a tremendous amount of conversations over the years and weeks and months about how do we close the racial wealth gap. And I have some very, very specific ideas, but I'm a problem solver. And when I'm solving problems, I always believe that you have to go to the source. And so many times when we talk about this, we talk about things that are symptoms or that are effects, and we don't talk about the cause. And, you know, one of my mentors, my uncle, Prophet Robert C. Blake Sr., preached a sermon when I was a little kid that I never forgot. And he said that, you know, if you want to change the dynamics in the health and the position of a tree, you don't clip the branches, you don't cut the leaves, you attack it at the roots. You attack it at the source. The only way to change the direction and the health of a tree is to attack it at the source. And I think that same principle applies to our situation in our community. And so in order for us to attack the root of this situation of closing the racial wealth gap, I think first we need to figure out how we got here. How did we get in this position? How did we get in this circumstance? I'm a big, I'm a lover of history, but not only history in the sense of understanding events that occurred. I like to put the pieces together. How did different historical events get us to this point economically? How did things in the past create the environment that we are in today? And so I want to spend a few minutes first just kind of taking you back and giving people an understanding of how we got in this situation, right? In the 1950s and 60s, we were under Jim Crow. During that time, we were not able to have an economy outside of our own community. Black neighborhoods were relegated to certain parts of the city, and we weren't free to just drive about. And so during that time, we were forced to do business amongst ourselves. When I have conversations with my parents and grandparents, they would tell me about a time when there were thriving businesses in black communities. All of the things that we outsource and use were all consolidated within our communities, whether it was grocery stores or cleaners or schools or anything that you can think of, everything was accessible. And even though we couldn't participate in the broader economy, we couldn't participate in the broader capitalism, we were able to do enough to take care of our families in our own communities. During that time, we also had 80% two-parent households in the black community. And so even though we were under immense pressure, even though the laws actually subjected us to second-class citizens, we were still able to take care of ourselves. And so during this time period, and if you haven't ever had the opportunity, I would advise you to get the book, The Color of Law. And The Color of Law talks about how the United States was segregated through legislation. And so a lot of people that's watching this are probably too young to know this or remember this or even have any context about this. But after World War II in the 1940s, there was something called the GI Bill. And that bill allowed for regular, normal U.S. citizens to now get home loans without any collateral, allowed them to go to college off of a stipend, and essentially this is what created the middle class. See, before World War II, there was no middle class in this country. White people and black people were poor. There was the rich and there was poor, and that's all we had. After the GI Bill, this flooded the country with billions of dollars in home loans and created what we call today suburbs. They didn't have suburbs in the 1950s and 60s. They didn't have interstate highways to be able to travel across the country in the 1950s and 60s. Most people during that time period lived in the cities. But when the government opened up its pocketbook and allowed people to buy homes across the country, you started to see suburbs pop up near every single major city. And people were able to build communities, build cities, and expand across this country. Well, guess what? Black people weren't able to participate in the GI Bill. We were not able to participate in the growth of this country. We were not able to participate in the influx of new homeowners during that time period. And so that was the first generation that created a huge separation in wealth. And across this country, cities and local municipalities, with the help of the U.S. government, because it was mandated that if any banks or any entities did lend to black people, they would lose all of their funding. And so during this time period in the 1950s and 60s, you had this massive expansion of home ownership across the country that we could not participate in. And at the very same time, local municipalities and local cities were zoning these new cities that they were building and developing. And what was happening in unison is that almost in every instance, when they were building and planning and zoning these cities, they would always relegate the black community to the worst parts of the city, to the most low-lying areas of a city, the areas that flooded the most, the areas that were aesthetically displeasing to the eye. This was happening across the country, and we were being zoned to only be able to live in one area of a city. This is how ghettos were formed. This is how ghettos were formed. This is why you can go into any black area around the country and they almost look identical. They almost look exactly the same. It's because local and state governments planned their zoning around prosperity for their communities while they relegated us to the worst parts of the city. The other thing that they did in our neighborhoods during that time period was they allowed for open zoning in black neighborhoods, meaning in addition to residential homes, you could have dumping sites and construction companies and liquor stores and all of these businesses that are displeasing to the eye. They were able to open up shop in black neighborhoods. That's why when you go in most black neighborhoods, there's a dumping site or there's a concrete company or there's some business that you wouldn't put in any other part of the city, and it was able to go in black neighborhoods. And so during this time, during the 40s and the 50s, they were curating a country that segregated us to the worst resources in the worst parts of the city. And so all of this stuff was going on during that time period. And guess what? We were still taking care of ourselves. We still had 80% two-parent households. And the racial wealth gap at that time was only 8-1. We owned over 32 million acres of land across this country. And what happened next? Civil rights. Fast forward to the late 1960s, and the Civil Rights Bill now suddenly integrated us. And so just a few years earlier, we couldn't go into the restaurants we wanted to. We couldn't go into parts of the town that we wanted to. We couldn't go in certain areas, and now the world was open to us. And you would think that that would be a good thing. But let's fast forward to the 1970s. And so just as integration was forcing itself onto this country, something else was happening. We were shifting from an industrial revolution to a technology revolution. And so again, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, you could work at a local factory and take care of your entire family. In fact, that's what most people in our community did. And so you can go into any city in this country, and there's probably an old warehouse district. And that old warehouse district is where everybody used to work. That's where your grandparents used to feed their families. That's where people were able to get jobs, to take care of and buy homes. This is when we manufactured things in this country. And when we shifted from the industrial age to the technology age, we stopped making things. We stopped manufacturing things, and all of those jobs shut down. All of those factories shut down. And as these suburbs were being built, now they were also developing software campuses and businesses that were expanding towards the suburbs. And so in the 1970s, just as we were able to be integrated into this capitalistic society and participate, all of the jobs were taken away from us. And now suddenly you had to have a 4-year college degree to work. Suddenly, instead of being able to catch the bus 2 blocks or 3 miles away, you had to drive 25 miles to commute for a job. And this caused massive unemployment in the black community. In the 1970s, in some cases, we had as high as 60 to 70% unemployment for black males. And so just a decade earlier, black males were able to get a job right in their own neighborhoods, taking care of their family. In the 1970s, those jobs were non-existent. You had thousands and thousands of black males in every major city that could not get or find unemployment. Big cities were some of the worst places to be. Go back and look at videos of New York City or Los Angeles in the 1970s. It was ridden with nothing but unemployment, people roaming the streets, and then drugs came in and took a stronghold on our communities. And so the 1970s was a transition period for the negative for us, because just as we thought we were going to be able to participate in the society just like everybody else, the economic floor that we were used and accustomed to was taken from us. And so what do you think happens when you have thousands of young men and young boys roaming the streets with no opportunities, no education, and no job? They were fighting every day. This is how gangs started. You did not have gangs like the Crips and the Bloods in the 50s and 60s. All of this started in the 1970s as a result of massive unemployment in our communities. And because the standard changed from being able to work with your hands and being able to do things locally to now having to have a college degree, this created a huge gap. And so our young boys turn to drugs, they turn to gangs, and they turn to their own devices to make up for this loss. At the very same time, the government stepped in the 1970s and created the welfare program. And so while the young men were out struggling on their own, trying to find employment and trying to find a job to take care of their families, the welfare program offered incentive and money to young women and children. But the man couldn't be involved. And so this was the very first generation of fatherless children, because the man had no employment. He either had to drive 20 miles away on a commute and leave his family. He got connected to drugs. He got associated or affiliated with gangs, or he just got caught up in a life that was not conducive to taking care of his family. And we lost an entire generation of men. This was all purposeful. None of this was accidental. And as we move into the 1980s, drugs continued to inundate and destroy our communities. And crack cocaine came in the 1980s and decimated a second generation of men. This was all mandated and funded by the government. Go and look up Iran-Contra. The United States actually used the money made from the sale of crack cocaine to fund a war and arm terrorists. This is all documented. This is in legislative testimony. And so while our communities and our families were being destroyed in the 1980s, they were using that money for their own self-interests. And we had a second generation of fatherless children. Crime went up, things got worse. But guess what? We still had some sense of community in the 80s and the 90s. We still had some sense of manhood. We still had some sense of who we were. If you go and listen to our music in the 80s and 90s, they weren't talking about the things they talk about today. There was diversity in our music. There was messages in our music. Our music was a reflection not only of our struggle, but our strength and our willingness to get out of those circumstances. We communicated with one another through our music. That's how hip hop was started. As a result of the decimation in struggle, in unemployment in the 1970s and 80s, we poured that pain into our art. And we created music that echoed across the country and united us. And as we went into the 90s, as all of these things were occurring decade after decade, they still couldn't break us. They still could not break us. And in 1995, most people don't know this. It was something they called a Million Man March. The funny thing is, I talked to my adult son about this, and he had never heard of the Million Man March. In 1995, the Nation of Islam and Minister Louis Farrakhan held a Million Man March in Washington, D.C., where 1 million men from around the world congregated for peace, for love, for unity, and for solidarity. It was one of the most magnificent things that you could ever imagine. 1 million black men in one place, no violence. If you want to know more about that, I suggest that you get the movie Get on the Bus by Spike Lee. The funny thing is, I looked for that movie recently and I couldn't hardly find it anywhere. But that movie will give you as much detail as you need to know about that time period. But it is my belief that when we showed that type of strength and that type of solidarity in the midst of everything that was going on in the 90s, violence was at an all-time high. Drugs were at an all-time high. And we still found a way to come together in unity and solidarity. I believe that put fear in the powers that be. Now, during that same time, and a lot of people don't remember this, the gangs formed a truce. In the 1990s, the Crips and the Bloods sat down, shook hands, and formed a truce. They came together. And so we still had hope. Right as early as 1995, we still had hope. We were on the right trajectory. And then the very next year, everything changed. Tupac got killed, then Biggie got killed, and then we had an East Coast, West Coast beef, and everything positive that we were fighting for got decimated. And we started war with one another. Our music was taken over. Our music was hijacked. And if you listen and look at the trajectory of our music from 1995 to present day, it has declined so sharply that today a lot of our music is meaningless. There's no message. And in fact, it is destructive. Because when we used to promote unity and togetherness and love and solidarity, for the past 30 years, the only thing that we have promoted is drug use and crime and murder and illegal activity and childish frivolity and wastefulness and all of the things that are destructive to our community. And that is the state that we have been in for the past 30 years. Our culture has been hijacked. Our music has been hijacked. Our influences have been hijacked. And the message of togetherness has been completely destroyed. And now we have a decision to make. Listen, right now, we're at a crossroads. There's a major conflict going on in this country. I'm not talking about a racial conflict. I'm not talking about a political conflict. I'm not even talking about a cultural conflict. I'm talking about a conflict between capitalism and community. Capitalism is an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit. Community is a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. And so the question is, how can you pursue individual success and have a feeling of fellowship with others? Those things are in direct conflict. That is the conflict that we have been dealing with in our community. That is the conflict that has us at odds with one another on every little thing, in constant competition with one another over every little thing, dragging one another down. We are unable to trust one another, unable to organize, unable to stand for anything of value outside of our own personal and financial interests. We have chosen capitalism over community. Capitalism has shifted our focus towards selfish economic gain. This is why we can justify selling drugs to our own people. This is why we can justify scamming our own people. This is why we can justify killing one another, because there's money involved. We are crabs in a barrel. But the barrel is the system, the capitalistic system that has us in conflict. It's all about getting to the bag. But the bag is nothing but a scheme to get to the fruit. And when the bag is involved, anything goes. There is a reason why our community has not improved economically in the last 50 years. It can't just be about money. At the very same time that we are having economic mobility, we are having moral decay. Crime is through the roof. Robberies, carjackings, drugs, murders. Those are crimes of opportunity. We have all this stuff going on because of the conflict between capitalism and community. Yeah, we have more millionaires now than we've ever had before, but we are divided as ever. The racial wealth gap has went from 8-1 to now 17-1. And so the question is, what do we need to do? What do we need? How do we solve this? Is it money? That's where most people go. It takes money. I don't believe that. I believe it takes something deeper than that. Before we get to the money, before we talk about economic mobility, we need something much, much simpler. We need something much more ingrained into who we are. We need peace. Principles, ethics, accountability, community, and empathy. The first thing we need are principles. Principles are a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as the foundation for a system of belief or behavior or for a chain of reasoning. We need a core set of principles that we all believe and abide by. Honor thy mother and thy father. That's an example of a principle. Right now, we don't have any principles. Right now, anything goes. As long as the bag is involved, we're willing to do anything. But if we are going to change our circumstances, we need a core set of principles. But not only do we need principles, we need ethics. Ethics are moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. See, ethics deal with how we interact with one another. Your principles dictate your grounding in how you live your life, but ethics come into play in our interaction with other people. When there's conflicts with other people, we need a code of ethics. How do we deal with each other? Right? What principles do we follow? Not only do we need principles, not only do we need accountability, not only do we need ethics, but we need accountability. Accountability is an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. I tell my kids all the time, it may not be your fault, but it's your responsibility. And that's how we need to live our life. Most of the things that happen to us will not be our fault. Things that were done to us in the past, things that other people have done. Many things are not our fault, but at the end of the day, it's our responsibility. We need to be accountable. We need to accept personal responsibility for our actions and decisions before we blame society, before we blame the government, before we blame the world. We need self-accountability. Not only do we need principles, not only do we need ethics, not only do we need accountability, we need cooperation. The process of working together to the same end. Right now, everybody's working for themselves. There's no cooperation. If it's in your best interest and not in mine, I'm not going to do it. If it causes me to sacrifice, I'm not willing to do it. That's not going to work. If we can't cooperate with one another, if we can't work together, there is no community. We need cooperation. Not only do we need principles and ethics and accountability and cooperation, but the last thing we need is empathy. The ability to understand and share the feelings of others. You know, sometimes we get so caught up and worried about what we're going through, we just look over other people's pain. On social media, it's easy to judge one another. People that are open and honest enough to be vulnerable get nothing but judgment. There's no understanding. There's no empathy. How can we survive as a community if we don't have the ability to understand and share feelings of the people that look just like us, that went through the same things that we went through? So if we're going to change our community, yeah, we need money. We need resources. We need wealth. But that wealth is going to be meaningless if we don't have peace. Principles, ethics, accountability, cooperation, and empathy. And if we take those things, that is enough to create a foundation for which we can build and close the racial wealth gap. But it's going to take all of us to do it. To be honest, man, they did a number on us. I just walked you through 50 years of oppression. And see, the art of war says that all war is based on deception. So in the past, our enemy was in front of us. They were in direct conflict with us. We could identify who our enemy was. But then our enemies got smart. They got covert. And instead of them opposing us directly, they started to deceive us. And for the past 50 years, we have been deceived into going from 80% two-parent households to 20% two-parent households. From owning 30 million plus acres of land around this country to owning less than 10 million acres of land around this country. We have been deceived from loving, from caring, from empathizing with one another to hating and fighting with one another every single day on social media. And so we're going to reverse engineer these things that have been done to us, we need to establish a foundational we need to establish a foundational belief in unity and solidarity. And that starts with peace. Principles, ethics, accountability, cooperation, and empathy. That's enough to change the racial wealth gap in one generation.
If God is for us, then who is against us?
Conspiracy or not, strategize and plot. Buy back your block, real estate and stocks. Stack what you got, hold down your spot. Strike while you hot and think the man up top. Conspiracy or not, strategize and plot. Buy back your block, real estate and stocks. Stack what you got, hold down your spot. Strike while you hot and think the man up top. Conspiracy or not, strategize and plot. Buy back your block, real estate and stocks. Stack what you got, hold down your spot. Strike while you hot and think the man up top. Conspiracy or not, strategize and plot. Buy back your block, real estate and stocks. Stack what you got, hold down your spot. Strike while you hot and think the man up top.
Conspiracy or not, strategize and plot.